Intelligence in Rick and Morty is not a gift, not in the way most universes would define it. It is not a source of comfort or pride or stability. It is a pressure, a gravity that pulls downward on every aspect of a person's life. And no character feels that weight more intensely, more constantly, or more painfully than Rick Sanchez. His intelligence is not simply something he possesses. It is something that shapes him, restricts him, isolates him, and follows him into every corner of his existence. Before he speaks, before he drinks, before he moves, the weight of his intellect presses against him like an invisible force he can never fully lift. The brilliance people admire in Rick does not come from joy or curiosity. It comes from survival, from necessity, from trauma, from a lifetime spent looking at the universe and realizing that most things are indifferent, most structures are fragile, and most meaning is invented by beings too frightened to face the truth that nothing lasts. For Rick, intelligence is not a path toward understanding. It is a spotlight revealing every flaw in the world, every inconsistency in reality, every limitation in the people he cares about. The more he understands, the heavier his life becomes. From the beginning, Rick learns that intelligence separates him from others. When he was younger, this separation might have felt like possibility, like potential, like freedom. But as he grew older, the separation widened until it became a chasm he could not cross. People who once seemed reachable suddenly felt distant. Conversations that once felt engaging became predictable. Relationships that once felt safe became fragile. His mind moved faster than the world around him, faster than the people around him, faster than his own ability to slow down and enjoy the details of life. The speed of his understanding became a curse, pulling him away from connection and into the endless noise of his thoughts. That noise is constant, a storm that never quiets, a hum beneath every moment. Rick experiences the world with an intensity that is not exhilarating but overwhelming. Every possibility expands into more possibilities. Every choice becomes a web of outcomes. Every mistake becomes a branching timeline with consequences he can imagine too clearly. Intelligence makes him aware of everything he cannot control, everything he has lost, everything that could go wrong, and everything that already has. This hyper-awareness becomes a form of anxiety disguised as brilliance. It never leaves him alone. The more Rick learns, the more he sees how vast the universe truly is. The infinity of worlds, the endless repetitions of people, the fragile edges of reality. This understanding does not give him comfort. It gives him perspective, and perspective, for someone like Rick, becomes unbearable. Understanding infinity removes the illusion of certainty. Understanding possibility removes the illusion of stability. Understanding complexity removes the illusion of meaning. His genius strips away the comforting lies that most beings rely on to get through the day. The lies that believe life has purpose by default. The lies that believe love is permanent. The lies that believe the universe cares. Rick knows better, and that knowledge costs him something essential. His intelligence also changes the way he interacts with his own emotions. He sees them, analyzes them, breaks them apart until they lose the softness that makes them human. He understands why he feels things, what triggers the reactions, how his past created his patterns. But understanding an emotion is not the same as feeling it. For Rick, intellect becomes a barrier, a wall of explanations that prevents him from experiencing sorrow, joy, fear, or tenderness with the simple honesty of someone who does not analyze everything. Emotion becomes a problem to solve, not a reality to inhabit. This detachment shelters him from pain, but it also separates him from the comfort pain could offer if felt fully. The cost of his intelligence becomes clearest in the relationships he tries, and often fails, to maintain. The people around him want connection, vulnerability, communication, and reciprocity. But these things require slowing down, stepping back, and allowing oneself to be seen without control or calculation. Rick struggles with all of this. His mind never turns off. His instincts lean toward observation rather than participation. When someone speaks to him, he hears layers of meaning they did not intend. When someone expresses affection, he questions the truth behind it. When someone criticizes him, he dissects the emotion, the motive, and the flaw behind their logic. This mental processing becomes a barrier that isolates him from the people who want to get close. Sometimes he responds with sarcasm. Sometimes he responds with anger. Sometimes he responds with silence. But the cause is always the same. His mind will not allow him to exist in the moment without analyzing it. And because of this, genuine intimacy feels unsafe. Someone with his level of awareness sees every potential loss before it happens, every fracture before it forms, every betrayal before it arrives. Intelligence makes him cautious, and caution makes him distant. There are moments when Rick allows himself to imagine what his life would be like if he were less intelligent. If he could move through the world without carrying every possibility on his shoulders. If he could connect with others without seeing the futility woven into the edges of connection. If he could love without imagining the ways love will be lost. If he could wake up without immediately remembering the vast emptiness of the universe. These moments are fleeting, but they reveal the truth beneath his cynicism. Rick does not believe intelligence makes him superior. He believes intelligence has ruined him. He envies the simplicity of other people, not because they are lesser, but because they can believe in things he lost long ago. They can believe in purpose. They can believe in meaning. They can believe in affection without dismantling it. Rick respects intelligence, but he longs for the emotional freedom that less intelligent beings maintain naturally. To him, ignorance is not weakness. It is innocence. It is peace. It is the quiet life he knows he cannot live, no matter how much he pretends he does not want it. Terrifyingly, his intelligence also gives him power, power to create, power to destroy, power to manipulate, power to escape, power to rewrite reality, power to end it. And power becomes a burden because the more capable he is, the more responsibility he carries. He never asked for responsibility, yet it clings to him. He never asked to be the smartest being in the room, yet he always is. And the pressure of this power makes him resent his own mind. He knows he can fix things. He knows he can ruin things. He knows he can change the fate of worlds. But he also knows that no amount of power can repair the things inside him that broke long before he understood how to manipulate gravity or rewrite physics. His intelligence does not protect him from pain. If anything, it magnifies it. When he feels grief, he feels it through layers of memory, possibility, and analysis. When he feels guilt, he sees every version of the world where he made a different choice. When he feels fear, he understands exactly why the fear exists, which only makes it sharper. His intelligence does not dull emotion. It sharpens it. It gives him context for his suffering, and context only deepens the wound. The cost of intelligence becomes undeniable in the moments when Rick tries to disappear, when he cannot bear the noise of his own mind, when the weight of his awareness becomes too heavy to hold, when he isolates himself not because he wants to be alone, but because he does not know how to exist with others without hurting them or being hurt. These moments reveal the truth that intelligence has become less of a strength and more of a burden. Rick's brilliance creates tools. It creates adventures. It creates universes. But it also creates isolation, exhaustion, and existential despair. He knows the cost of everything, yet cannot find the value in anything. He can build worlds, but not trust. He can break physics, but not patterns. He can escape death, but not loneliness. Intelligence becomes the lens through which he sees everything, but the lens is cracked, and the cracks distort his view of himself most of all. Still, buried beneath all of this, there is a quiet longing that intelligence cannot erase. The longing to feel present. The longing to feel connected. The longing to feel at peace. The longing to exist without the relentless weight of awareness. These longings reveal the truth that he is not proud of his intelligence. He is trapped by it. Rick Sanchez is not a character defined by brilliance. He is a character defined by what brilliance stole from him. The cost is not just isolation, it is intimacy, it is peace, it is innocence. It is the ability to believe in anything without dissecting it until it breaks. And, in understanding this cost, we begin to see the humanity beneath the cynicism. Rick Sanchez does not simply understand the universe, he outruns it. His mind races ahead of every conversation, every emotional moment, every fragile human interaction that requires patience or presence. This speed, this relentless acceleration of thought, becomes another cost of his intelligence. It widens the gap between what he knows and what he feels, between what he can build and what he can hold, between the world he sees and the world he wishes he could believe in. In the space created by this gap, his heart falls behind. From a young age, Rick realized he was different. Not in the triumphant storytelling sense, not in a way that felt like destiny. Instead, he noticed the signs in small, revealing moments. The ways people hesitated before responding to him. The ways he solved problems faster than others even understood the problem existed. The ways he questioned things no one else thought to question. At first, he believed this difference would make him special. He imagined a difference, life shaped by discovery, by exploration, by wonder. He imagined a world where intelligence opened doors rather than closing them. But the reality of outpacing everyone else is that you eventually run alone. Rick soon learned that people live slower than his thoughts move. They need time to react, time to understand, time to process emotion. He never had that time. His mind jumps ahead, analyzing outcomes before they happen, breaking down possibilities before anyone else even sees them. This speed prevents him from experiencing life at the same rhythm as the people around him. Emotional moments that should unfold gently become impatient experiences for him. He feels pressure to rush through them, anticipating problems before they arise, interruptions before they form, disappointment before it appears. The result is a man who cannot settle into the present. His heart tries to catch up, but his mind keeps moving. He knows what people will say before they say it. He knows how they will react to his vulnerability. He knows how they will reinterpret his words, how they will misunderstand his intentions, how they will eventually disappoint him or be disappointed by him. When you believe you can predict the fallout of every emotional risk, you stop taking risks. Rick learned this early. He learned to protect himself by anticipating pain and stepping out of its path before it arrives. But in stepping away from pain, he also stepped away from hope. The gap between mind and heart grows wider as years pass. Rick becomes a man who knows the chemical composition of happiness, but cannot feel it. He understands love as a neurological pattern, a survival strategy for a social species, a biological illusion designed to encourage reproduction. This understanding should give him control. Instead, it deprives him of connection. When you explain love too deeply, it loses the mystery that makes it comforting. When you dissect tenderness, it loses the softness that makes it meaningful. Rick knows too much to surrender to emotion easily. He knows how fragile affection is. He knows how easily people lie to themselves. He knows how quickly relationships collapse when faced with inconvenience or fear. He knows how temporary everything is, not just in theory, but in statistical detail. His mind refuses to let him forget it. The knowledge that things fall apart follows him everywhere, making it difficult for his heart to form attachments without anticipating the end. Sometimes, Rick tells himself that this detachment makes him superior, that he is free, that he does not need the messy, inconsistent, unpredictable territory of human connection. He tells himself he is above it, that he has evolved past the need for emotional dependency. But these are stories he tells in moments of fear, not truth. The truth is that his intelligence built walls faster than he could understand what he was losing. He became lonely in the spaces where vulnerability should have lived. The distance between his mind and heart becomes clearest in the moments when someone tries to break through his defenses. When someone shows him sincerity, he senses its expiration date. When someone expresses affection, he calculates the risk of losing them. When someone opens up, he sees their vulnerability as a variable that could shift against him. This analytical instinct is not cruelty. It is fear disguised as clarity. Rick does not trust what he cannot control, and emotion refuses to be controlled. He tries to connect. He tries to slow down. He tries to meet people in the middle. But the rhythm of his mind keeps disrupting the attempt. He overthinks intimacy. He overanalyzes kindness. He doubts compliments. He dissects sentiment. His heart wants to believe, but his mind always interrupts. Rick is capable of deep feeling. He simply reaches the emotional destination before others even begin the journey. And waiting for them feels like vulnerability. Vulnerability feels like danger. This conflict becomes exhausting. His heart longs for companionship, for belonging, for the warmth he pretends he does not need. But his intelligence keeps telling him that all of these things are temporary illusions. It is a conflict that tears at him every day. The desire to be understood collides with the fear that true understanding will expose his flaws. The desire to be held collides with the fear that closeness will lead to loss. The desire to love collides with the fear that love will hurt more deeply than anything else. In many ways, the cost of Rick's intelligence is that he sees the end of everything before the beginning has a chance to breathe. He sees the breakup in the new relationship. He sees the betrayal in the friendship. He sees the failure in the plan. He sees the decay in the moment of joy. When your mind always looks ahead, your heart struggles to remain in the present. And Rick lives almost entirely ahead, never here, never now. Yet beneath all his cynicism, there is a quiet truth. If he did not care, he would not fear loss so intensely. If he truly embraced meaninglessness, he would not lament the consequences of his mistakes. If he were immune to attachment, he would not drink to suppress longing. The conflict inside him proves his humanity. His heart tries to reach the pace of his mind, and though it cannot, the attempt reveals that Rick is not as cold as he appears. His emotions exist, they simply lag behind. There are rare moments when his heart catches him by surprise. Moments when he feels tenderness unexpectedly. Moments when someone's presence calms him instead of threatening him. Moments when he laughs, not because he is entertained, but because he feels connected. These moments remind him that intelligence did not erase his capacity for love, it only taught him to fear it. And fear is not fate. It is a response that can change, even if slowly. The cost of intelligence, for Rick, is the distance it creates between understanding and feeling, between predicting and experiencing, between knowing the world and participating in it. His heart is always chasing after his mind, breathless, exhausted, trying not to be left behind. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, Rick allows himself to slow down just enough for his heart to catch up. In those moments, the gap narrows, the weight lightens, the noise quiets, and Rick senses, however briefly, the possibility that intelligence does not have to define the boundaries of his emotional world, that he can live not only in analysis, but in experience, that he can exist not only as a mind, but as a person. It is small progress, but real. And for someone like Rick Sanchez, who has spent a lifetime outrunning himself, small progress is profound. For all the universes Rick can navigate, for all the dimensions he can tear open with a flick of his wrist, there is one landscape he never learned to read with ease: his own family. Intelligence gives him the ability to understand cosmic structure, biological machinery, temporal anomalies, and the behavior of entire civilizations. Yet when it comes to the people closest to him, that intelligence becomes strangely useless. The irony of Rick Sanchez is that he can decipher the secrets of existence, but he cannot decipher the emotions of the people sitting across the dinner table. This limitation is not a flaw of intellect. It is a flaw created by a lifetime of fear, avoidance, and emotional fragmentation. Family requires a type of intelligence Rick never cultivated, the kind that grows from vulnerability, patience, and presence. Rick can solve quantum equations, but he cannot solve the discomfort he feels when someone expresses affection. He can predict the movement of galaxies, but he cannot predict how to hold a moment of sincerity without flinching. He can map out every possible version of his daughter across the multiverse, but he cannot map out how to be her father in a way that feels real. His family feels him, even when he hides, especially Beth. She grew up watching a father who could invent anything except stability. His brilliance cast a long shadow over her life, creating both longing and resentment. She idolized him while craving something simpler from him, something gentler, but Rick did not know how to give that. He could build artificial intelligence in an afternoon, but the emotional intelligence required to be a consistent parent remained foreign territory. Rick sees this, even if he pretends not to. He understands the tension he created, the way his absence carved shapes into Beth's sense of self. He is aware of the damage, painfully aware at times, but awareness does not translate into action, not for him. His mind moves too fast, his fear rises too quickly, and the expectations of family feel too heavy. When faced with emotional intimacy, he often responds with sarcasm, avoidance, or an abrupt exit, not because he does not care, but because caring demands something he does not know how to give. With Morty, the cost of intelligence becomes even clearer. Morty looks up to him with a mix of admiration and exhaustion. He wants to believe Rick's adventures mean something, that the danger and chaos have purpose. He wants to trust that Rick sees him as more than a sidekick. But Rick, in his hyper-awareness, struggles to slow down enough to treat Morty like a child who needs guidance, instead of a variable in his calculations. Rick sees all the futures Morty could face. He sees the dangers Morty does not know to fear. He sees the weight of decisions Morty cannot yet grasp. This awareness should make Rick gentle. Instead, it often makes him frustrated. It is difficult for someone with Rick's level of intellect to understand why Morty needs time to process something. Rick comprehended instantly. He forgets what it feels like to learn slowly. He forgets what it means to approach the universe with uncertainty rather than information. He forgets that intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing. The cost of this disconnect is visible in their dynamic. Rick tries to teach Morty lessons through chaos, believing that experience will shape him better than words. But Morty needs stability, reassurance, and emotional presence, things Rick struggles to provide. When Morty becomes overwhelmed, Rick reacts with impatience because emotional overwhelm is something he trained himself to suppress long ago. Yet beneath that impatience lies a fear Rick cannot admit, the fear of failing someone he actually cares about. Summer offers him another mirror. She challenges him, listens to him, argues with him, and in some odd way understands him more easily than Morty does. But even with her, Rick keeps a distance. He respects her intelligence, admires her resilience, and acknowledges her capability even when he pretends not to. But closeness still frightens him. Intelligence does not erase fear. It amplifies it by showing every possible scenario where emotional risk leads to loss. Rick knows that loving his family makes them vulnerable. Worse, it makes him vulnerable. His mind predicts every way they could be hurt, every way he could hurt them, every path that leads to regret. This prediction machine inside his head keeps him from embracing the moments where connection could actually happen. He knows their flaws. He knows their blind spots. He knows their weaknesses. And because he knows these things too clearly, he struggles to simply love them as they are. There are moments, rare and fleeting, when Rick allows himself to feel the pull of family, a shared silence, a moment of fear for their safety, a passing smile he did not expect to give. These moments disrupt him. They make him hesitate. They make him realize that emotional intelligence is not something you learn in a lab. It is something you learn through showing up, through trying, through risking tenderness, even when it terrifies you. Rick senses this truth, but stepping into it feels like stepping into free fall. His family often misinterprets his distance as coldness. They do not see how much effort it takes for him to stay. They do not see the internal conflict when he chooses companionship over escape. They do not see the way he suppresses the urge to leave the moment vulnerability enters the room. They do not see how difficult it is for him to sit at a table surrounded by people who expect him to be more than a mind. They do not see that staying is, for Rick, the bravest choice he makes. The cost of intelligence reveals itself in these small moments. The moments when Rick cannot say what he feels because the words become tangled between mind and heart. The moments when he watches his family struggle and wants to help but does not know how. The moments when he wishes he could be softer, kinder, more present, but his intellect pulls him in the opposite direction, toward analysis instead of empathy. Yet even with all this distance, Rick's love for his family exists. It is messy, quiet, inconsistent, and often disguised, but it is real. Intelligence has made him cautious, guarded, and painfully aware of every risk that comes with love. But it has not erased his desire to protect them, to keep them alive, to see them grow, to remain part of their story, even when he feels like he does not deserve a place in it. The tragedy is that he rarely expresses this love in ways they can recognize. The beauty is that he keeps trying anyway, in small gestures that go unnoticed, in sacrifices he does not explain, in moments where he chooses presence over escape. His mind may outrun his heart, but it does not silence it completely. Rick may never become the father or grandfather they hope for, but with each moment he stays, with each choice to return home instead of disappearing into another dimension, he bridges the gap created by his intelligence. Slowly, quietly, he learns that genius does not absolve him of emotional responsibility, and though he stumbles often, the effort itself becomes a kind of connection. For most beings across the multiverse, the universe is something distant, something mysterious, something beyond comprehension, but not beyond wonder. People look at the stars and feel hope. They imagine possibilities. They create stories to make sense of the unknown. But Rick Sanchez does not get to wonder. He does not get to imagine. Intelligence strips away that comfort. The universe is not a mystery to him. It is a machine laid open, with all its flaws exposed. And knowing too much about the universe transforms it from something beautiful into something brutally honest. Rick understands the mechanics of existence the way most people understand a simple household object. The structure, the limitations, the absurdities, the contradictions. He sees the glitches in reality. He recognizes the shortcuts of creation. He knows which laws of physics are stable and which are stitched together with cosmic duct tape. This knowledge should be empowering, and in some moments it is, but more often it becomes a source of despair. When you see the universe without illusion, you also see how empty it can be. One of the heavier costs of Rick's intelligence is the way it reveals the universe as fundamentally indifferent. Not malicious, not nurturing, simply indifferent. The universe does not care whether he lives, dies, invents, destroys, laughs, or collapses. It does not reward effort. It does not punish cruelty. It does not assign meaning or purpose. This truth, which Rick cannot unlearn, makes existence feel hollow. He cannot lean on faith, fate, or cosmic comfort the way others do. His brilliance leaves no room for myth. Every attempt to believe in something greater collapses under the weight of his understanding. This understanding follows him into every dimension. No matter where he travels, the pattern remains the same. Life arises, evolves, builds, destroys, repeats. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall. Individuals attach meaning to things that vanish as soon as time moves forward. Rick sees this everywhere, the same stories unfolding with different faces, the same tragedies wearing slightly different costumes, the same illusions people cling to, hoping to escape the truth that nothing they build remains. This repetition exhausts him. When you see infinite timelines, you see infinite cycles of the same emotional mistakes. The multiverse, for Rick, becomes a hall of mirrors. Every counterpart of himself, every variation of his family, every alternate version of events reminds him of how predictable intelligence can make life feel. Even the versions of himself that made different choices reveal the same underlying patterns, confirming a truth he struggles to escape. Intelligence can alter outcomes, but it cannot rewrite the emotional laws of existence. People long for connection. People suffer from loss. People fear insignificance. These constants exist across realities, and for someone who sees everything through the lens of pattern, recognition, they offer no comfort. Cosmic indifference also shapes Rick's reaction to death. He does not fear it. He does not revere it. He does not romanticize it. He understands it as a chemical process, the end point of biological machinery. But death in a multiverse loses its solidity. When infinite versions of oneself exist, the concept of mortality becomes blurred. Rick has died before, or rather, countless versions of him have. This experience fractures the meaning most beings attach to their existence. if you can be replaced by another version of yourself, if your timeline is just one among endless paths, then the significance of your life becomes difficult to grasp. This is the paradox Rick faces. He knows life is meaningless in the cosmic sense, but he cannot stop longing for meaning in the personal sense. Intelligence tells him that caring is irrational. Emotion tells him that caring is unavoidable. The universe reveals itself as chaotic and uncaring, but his heart exposes the one truth he cannot escape. Even in an indifferent universe, he wants something more. He wants to matter to someone. He wants to leave a mark that is not erased by the next timeline. He wants to feel that his existence, however small, however flawed, had weight. The cost of intelligence becomes even more apparent when Rick confronts the absurdity of existence. He understands that most beings survive by embracing narratives that give their lives shape: hope, destiny, morality, meaning. These constructs help people navigate reality without drowning in existential fear. But Rick cannot embrace these constructs without dissecting them. Hope becomes delusion. Destiny becomes coincidence. Morality becomes subjective. Meaning becomes invention. These realizations may be accurate, but accuracy does not always bring peace. Sometimes illusion is the safer path. Because he cannot accept illusion, Rick often turns to cynicism as a shield. Cynicism allows him to appear unaffected. Cynicism allows him to pretend he chose meaninglessness rather than being crushed by it. Cynicism allows him to laugh at the absurdity of existence instead of confronting the ache that grows beneath it. But beneath the sarcasm, beneath the bravado, there is a man who wishes he could believe in something without tearing it apart. A man who envies those who can hold meaning without needing it to be scientifically provable. The universe itself becomes a reminder of everything Rick has lost. The more he explores, the more he realizes how rare sincere connection is, how fragile love is, how easy it is to break someone who trusts you. Intelligence gives him the tools to move freely through the multiverse, but it does not give him the ability to escape the consequences of his emotional patterns. Wherever he goes, he carries himself, his grief, his guilt, his longing, his contradictions. His intelligence cannot isolate him from that truth. At times, he tries to fill the cosmic emptiness with invention. He builds worlds, devices, realities that distract him from the weight of existence. Creation becomes a temporary escape, but the more he builds, the more he realizes that the universe remains unchanged. He can add layers to it, but the core remains the same. Indifference, impermanence, absurdity. No amount of genius can rewrite the fundamental nature of reality. Yet the universe does offer Rick something, even if he rarely sees it. Possibility. Not the possibility of certainty or eternal meaning, but the possibility of small, personal meaning created moment by moment. The possibility of connection, even if fleeting. The possibility of tenderness, even if fragile. The possibility of joy, even in a world without guarantees. Rick spends so much time looking at the universe through the lens of hopelessness that he forgets these possibilities exist. But they do, quietly waiting for him to notice them. The universe may be indifferent, but the people in Rick's life are not. Morty cares, Summer cares, Beth cares. Even Jerry, in his lost, stumbling way, cares. They bring meaning into Rick's world in ways science cannot measure. Their presence does not contradict the nature of reality. It simply softens it. They remind him that meaning does not need cosmic approval to exist. It can be small. It can be human. It can be real. The cost of intelligence is that Rick sees the universe too clearly to find comfort in illusion, but not clearly enough to dismiss the desire for connection. He lives suspended between knowledge and longing, between the emptiness of space and the warmth of the people who keep pulling him back from it. And in that suspension, he learns that even in an indifferent universe, the smallest moments of connection can anchor a person to life. For someone as brilliant as Rick Sanchez, escape should be easy. He can open portals to any universe, create machines that erase consequences, rewrite memories, rebuild bodies, or abandon them entirely. With his intelligence, escape should be limitless. And yet, every escape route Rick takes eventually circles back to himself. The cost of intelligence is not just knowing too much, it is being unable to outrun the parts of yourself that knowledge refuses to silence. Rick escapes because staying still is unbearable. Stillness invites thoughts. Thoughts invite emotion. And emotion is the one realm where his genius offers no advantage. When faced with something he cannot solve with intellect, Rick does what he always does. He runs into another world, another distraction, another bottle, another reckless plan, disguised as an adventure. But the irony is that every escape he designs is crafted by the same mind that built the cage he is trying to break from. He escapes through travel. He escapes through science. He escapes through humor. He escapes through addiction. He escapes through cynicism. Each method offers temporary relief, but none address the underlying weight he carries. And the more he runs, the more he reinforces the truth he refuses to face. Escape is not freedom when the thing you are running from lives inside you. Travel is his oldest form of escape. The multiverse gives him infinite exits, infinite versions of reality, where he does not have to face responsibility, grief, or intimacy. He can always leave. He can jump to a world where problems do not exist yet, a world where different choices were made, a world where he is not accountable. But the stability he seeks is impossible, because stability requires presence. And presence is the one thing Rick struggles to maintain. The more portals he opens, the more the universe expands outward, but the more his internal world shrinks into loneliness. Science is his most admired escape. Brilliant, innovative, limitless. It gives him purpose when he feels directionless, control when he feels powerless, distraction when he feels too much. But every invention is also a barrier, a way to avoid sitting still with the emotional debris he never cleans up. His genius becomes a shield he hides behind. The more complex his creations become, the more transparent the avoidance becomes. Science, for Rick, is both salvation and self-sabotage. It gives him everything except the ability to face himself. Humor is another escape, one that hides his vulnerability behind sarcasm and mockery. Rick uses humor like armor. If he makes the joke first, no one can hurt him. If he laughs at himself, no one else gets to define him. But humor, for him, is often a disguise. Beneath every joke lies something unspoken: fear, regret, hope, pain. Humor lets him speak without saying anything meaningful. It lets him stay in the room without being emotionally present in it. The people around him laugh, but the laughter does not bring him closer to them. It builds walls instead of bridges. Addiction is the escape that costs him the most. It quiets the noise in his head for a moment, softens the edges of his fear, numbs the weight of his awareness. But the relief is temporary, and the aftermath is heavier each time. Addiction convinces him that he is escaping, but in truth he is sinking. The moments he tries to quit reveal how deeply he longs for clarity and how afraid he is of what clarity might force him to confront. Intelligence does not help him here. It makes him articulate the problem without giving him the strength to solve it. Cynicism is perhaps the escape that defines him the most. It gives him distance from hope and therefore distance from disappointment. If he expects nothing, he cannot lose anything. If he believes life is meaningless, he cannot be hurt when something ends. Cynicism protects him, but it also traps him. It blinds him to moments of genuine connection. It convinces him that sincerity is weakness. It tells him that caring is irrational, even when he feels the instinct to care deeply. Cynicism is the escape that keeps him safest, and yet it is the escape that isolates him the most. No matter how many forms of escape Rick uses, they all share a single flaw. They do not remove the source of his pain. They simply delay it. The grief he avoids remains untouched. The guilt he avoids collects like dust. The longing he avoids gathers quietly in the corners of his life. He runs, jumps, drinks, jokes, and builds his way into temporary comfort. But none of it replaces the thing he lost long ago, the ability to feel safe with himself. The cost of intelligence becomes clearest in these moments of escape. Rick understands, at a level most beings never reach, how small individuals are in the grand scheme of existence. He knows the universe does not care about his pain. He knows the multiverse will continue whether he heals or breaks. He knows his emotions are chemical patterns, his memories are neurons firing, his grief is a survival mechanism. But understanding does not protect him from feeling. Intelligence explains his suffering. It does not soothe it. This creates a conflict inside him that escape cannot resolve. His mind tells him none of it matters, but his heart refuses to let go. His mind tells him he is free, but his heart clings to attachments. His mind tells him connection is meaningless, but his heart aches when he loses it. His mind tells him escape is logical, but his heart wants a place to stay. There are moments when escape fails, moments where no portal, invention, joke, or substance can silence the truth he carries. These moments terrify him because they reveal the one escape he has never mastered, sitting still with himself. In those moments, he feels the weight of his intelligence in full. He feels the cost of every avoidance, every lonely exit, every silent wound. And though these moments break him open, they also show him what he has been running from, not the universe, not responsibility, not connection, but the vulnerability he has never allowed himself to feel. The slow growth of Rick Sanchez begins not when he stops escaping, but when he begins to question why he runs at all. He starts to see that escape does not erase pain. It only stretches it across time. He begins to recognize that the people around him offer something none of his inventions can provide, a reason to stay. And staying, even for him, becomes a kind of courage. The cost of his intelligence is that he sees escape as the easiest option. The beauty of his humanity is that, sometimes, he chooses to stay anyway. For most people, identity is built over time. It grows out of relationships, memories, mistakes, hopes, and the quiet moments that shape the sense of who they are. But for Rick Sanchez, identity is not a steady line. It is a shattered mirror. Each shard reflects a different version of him across the multiverse. Each piece showing a truth that contradicts the others. Each fragment reminding him that he is both unique and replaceable. Intelligence gives him access to every possible version of himself, but that access breaks something fundamental inside him. When there are infinite Ricks, the question of who he is becomes impossible to answer. Rick knows he is not special, not in the cosmic sense, not in the mathematical sense, not in the multiversal sense. For someone with his mind, this realization is devastating. Most beings anchor their identity in the belief that they are singular, irreplaceable, the only version of themselves that exists. This belief provides comfort. It makes choices matter. It gives life weight. But Rick cannot believe this. He has seen too many versions of himself to hold on to the illusion of singularity. Every alternate Rick he encounters reminds him that his identity is not a destiny, but an accident. This knowledge fractures him. When he meets another Rick who made different choices, he sees the ghost of the person he might have become. When he meets one who is crueler, he sees the shadows he fears inside himself. When he meets one who appears happier, he questions why he cannot achieve that peace. Every variation becomes a mirror that distorts his sense of self. Instead of grounding him, these reflections make him question whether his individuality even exists. If 1,000 Ricks can make 1,000 different decisions, then identity stops feeling like a truth and starts feeling like a coincidence. This multiversal fragmentation also exposes him to versions of his own success and failure that his mind cannot fully process. When he meets a Rick who has a loving family, he wonders what he lost. When he meets a Rick who is alone, he wonders what he escaped. When he meets a Rick who died, he wonders why he survived. These comparisons create a storm of contradictions inside him. He is simultaneously the best and worst version of himself, the most loved and the most hated, the most brilliant and the most broken. How can a person build a stable identity when every possible version of themselves exists at once? Rick tries to create a stable sense of self through superiority, telling himself he is the smartest Rick, the freest, the least constrained by emotion or morality. But even this narrative fractures. He knows intelligence does not measure worth. He knows freedom does not equal happiness. He knows moral detachment does not erase loneliness. This self-created myth crumbles every time he encounters a Rick whose life contradicts it. He tells himself he is unique, but every alternate version proves otherwise. This creates a deeper identity crisis that intelligence amplifies rather than solves. Rick cannot trust his own motivations because he has seen versions of himself act out of kindness, cruelty, fear, and love. He cannot trust his memories because alternate timelines reveal how easily reality can shift. He cannot trust his moral compass because he has seen moral codes vary across universes. Even his pain becomes uncertain. Which part of it belongs to him, and which part is shaped by the echoes of other Ricks he has met? Identity becomes fluid, unstable, and unpredictable. The cost of this fragmentation appears in his daily life. Rick struggles with consistency because he does not believe stability matters. He struggles with accountability because he can always imagine a timeline where the consequences do not exist. He struggles with commitment because commitment requires believing that his choices define him. And if he does not believe he is singular, committing to anything feels pointless. Why choose a path when infinite versions of him are choosing infinite paths simultaneously? This fractured identity also affects his relationships. When people express care for him, he wonders which version of him they care about. When they express disappointment, he wonders whether he deserves it or if another version of himself earned it. When they express love, he questions whether love can exist for someone who is not a fixed person. His inability to see himself as stable makes him believe no one else can see him clearly either. This belief creates distance, even when he longs for connection. There are rare moments when Rick catches a glimpse of a stable identity emerging. Small moments where he acts with sincerity rather than fear. Moments where he feels something genuine, not filtered through analysis. moments where he shows care without calculation. In these brief flashes, he senses a version of himself that feels real, not the smartest, not the strongest, not the freest, just human. These moments terrify him because they challenge his belief that he is irreparably fragmented. They suggest that identity might exist not in the multiverse, but in choices he makes moment by moment. But these moments are fragile. His mind quickly returns to analysis. He questions whether the feeling was real or a pattern, whether the choice mattered or was arbitrary, whether the connection was genuine or a byproduct of circumstance. Identity slips through his fingers the way meaning slips through the universe, something he can touch briefly but never hold. Despite this, Rick's fractured identity contains one consistent truth. He cannot stop searching for stability, for belonging, for pieces of himself that feel solid. His intelligence does not silence the desire to know who he is beneath the layers of possibility. It amplifies it. He questions his identity not out of arrogance, but out of fear. The fear that he does not exist in any meaningful way. The fear that he is only the sum of variables. The fear that, without illusion, there is no self left to hold. Yet the very act of questioning reveals something important. Only someone who longs for coherence could feel the pain of fragmentation so deeply. Only someone who desires meaning could fear meaninglessness this intensely. Only someone who wants identity could mourn its instability. The cost of Rick's intelligence is that he sees every version of himself except the one that matters most, the one he is becoming. Not the one he could have been, not the one he should have been, not the one he fears he might be, but the one that forms with each moment he chooses connection over withdrawal, presence over escape, sincerity over performance. Identity, for Rick, is not found in multiversal reflection. It is found in the choices he is most afraid to make. Even if he does not fully believe it yet, the fractured pieces of himself are not his prison. They are his starting point. Morality is not a simple concept for Rick Sanchez. It is not a fixed line or a guiding truth. It is a shifting equation, one he recalculates in every moment, depending on context, risk, and emotion. With his level of intelligence, morality becomes less a matter of right and wrong, and more a matter of efficiency, survival, and the cold logic of possibility. He does not see ethical dilemmas the way others do. He sees variables, consequences, patterns, and probabilities. This perception complicates everything, because the clearer he sees the structure of morality, the less stable it becomes. Rick understands that morality is a construct, one that varies across cultures, species, and dimensions. He has seen universes where kindness is currency, universes where cruelty is law, universes where morality is irrelevant because existence is too chaotic to allow for ethical consistency. This knowledge erodes the foundation most people rely on to navigate their lives. When you see morality as relative, it becomes difficult to believe in any version of it completely. Rick lives with this difficulty constantly. He knows there is no universal code. He knows morality is something beings create to feel secure. But knowing this does not protect him from the consequences of his decisions or the guilt that grows quietly underneath them. His intelligence gives him the ability to evaluate any action with precision. He sees every potential outcome before he chooses a path. He knows who will be harmed, who will benefit, and whether the suffering ahead is statistically insignificant or emotionally devastating. But this clarity does not guide him toward morality. It overwhelms him. When you see every consequence at once, choosing becomes paralyzing. The simplicity of right and wrong gets lost in the complexity of infinite outcomes. Rick responds to this overwhelm by retreating into detachment. If he feels nothing, the decision becomes easier. If he convinces himself morality is meaningless, he does not have to confront the weight of choosing incorrectly. But detachment is not neutrality, it is protection. And protection always comes with a cost. Rick often tells himself he operates above morality, that ethics are trivial, that emotional reasoning is flawed. He mocks those who seek simple answers to complicated problems. But beneath the cynicism lies a truth he rarely admits. He does care, he cares deeply. He simply does not know how to reconcile caring with the chaotic, unpredictable nature of the universe he understands so fully. His intelligence magnifies the contradictions that morality tries to hide. The contradiction between what is right and what is safe. The contradiction between what is fair and what is realistic. The contradiction between what he wants and what he can justify. This creates a painful tension inside him. He wants to protect the people he cares about, but doing so often requires actions that hurt others. He wants to be someone Morty can look up to, but his decisions often expose Morty to danger. He wants to preserve his freedom, but freedom means taking actions that disregard the moral boundaries others consider sacred. For someone who sees the universe without illusion, morality is never simple. Every choice is a compromise. Every compromise carries a cost. Every cost returns to him eventually. There are moments when Rick's intelligence pushes him toward action without considering morality at all. He can solve a problem instantly, so he does. He can remove an obstacle effortlessly, so he does. He can manipulate a situation with precision, so he does. These moments look like confidence from the outside, but they are often desperation. He acts quickly to avoid confronting the emotional complexity of the situation. He chooses logic over empathy, not because empathy is foreign to him, but because empathy slows him down. And slowing down means feeling. Feeling means vulnerability. Vulnerability means risk. Yet, despite all of this, Rick does not escape morality. He feels its pull even when he resists it. When he hurts someone he loves, something inside him cracks. When he avoids responsibility, guilt collects like dust in the corners of his mind. When he tries to act above consequence, the consequences return eventually, reminding him that intelligence does not protect him from being human. The very thing he tries to outrun becomes the thing he cannot escape, the emotional truth that morality still matters to him, even when he pretends it does not. The cost of intelligence shows itself in the moments when Rick tries to justify actions he knows are wrong. He explains the logic, he lists the calculations, he presents the data. But no argument silences the feeling that lingers afterward. He can explain the universe, but he cannot explain away the ache that comes from harming someone unintentionally. He cannot erase the memory of Morty's disappointment. He cannot ignore Beth's confusion. He cannot deny the way Summer looks at him when he crosses a line. These emotional consequences are the one aspect of morality his intelligence cannot manipulate. Rick's relationship with morality is also shaped by fear. The fear of becoming the worst version of himself. The fear of losing the few people he still loves. The fear of proving that his cynicism is not protection but prophecy. Intelligence makes him aware of what he could become if he fully abandons morality. This awareness terrifies him. He sees the versions of himself who lost all connection to empathy. He sees the paths where he becomes a force of destruction. He sees the future where his genius isolates him completely. These possibilities haunt him more than any villain or cosmic threat. This fear creates moments of surprising restraint. Times when Rick chooses not to act. Times when he allows others to make decisions. Times when he puts his tools away and lets life unfold without interference. These are the moments where his heart briefly outruns his mind, where the possibility of moral choice becomes larger than the fear of emotional consequence. He will never admit these moments matter to him, but they reveal a truth intelligence cannot erase. Rick wants to be better than his patterns. He wants to be more than the logical conclusion of his trauma. He wants morality to mean something, even if he does not know how to define it. The struggle continues endlessly. Some days he chooses cynicism. Some days he chooses connection. Some days he chooses survival at all costs. Some days he tries, quietly, to choose compassion. But the fact that he wrestles with morality at all reveals the complexity intelligence cannot flatten. A truly amoral being does not question their choices. Rick questions everything. The questions hurt, but the presence of the questions shows there is still something alive inside him that refuses to let intelligence decide everything. Morality for Rick is not a system. It is a conflict between fear and longing, between logic and emotion, between the universe he understands and the life he secretly wishes he could believe in. Intelligence complicates this conflict. But the conflict itself is proof that intelligence did not strip away his humanity. It only made his humanity harder to access. Slowly, painfully, Rick begins to see that morality is not defined by the universe. It is defined by the choices he makes when no one is watching. It is defined by the moments he chooses connection over convenience. It is defined by the times he lets himself care, even when caring hurts. Intelligence may pull his moral compass off course, but the compass is still there, quiet, flickering, trying to point towards something real. And the fact that he looks for it at all means he has not given up on himself. For most people, consequences arrive slowly. They unfold across time in ways that allow understanding, adjustment, growth, apology. But for Rick Sanchez, consequences travel faster. They catch him even when he leaps across galaxies, even when he crosses dimensions, even when he abandons an entire timeline in search of a fresh one. Intelligence lets him escape danger, responsibility, physical harm, even death itself. But it cannot shield him from the emotional aftermath of his choices. And this, more than anything, reveals the cost of being who he is. No matter how far he runs, consequences travel at the speed of memory. Rick is haunted not by the things he cannot solve, but by the things he solved too quickly, the choices he made without feeling, the people he treated as variables, the moments he dismissed because they were too slow for his fast mind, the tragedies he convinced himself were necessary. Intelligence teaches him how to calculate outcomes, but it does not teach him how to live with them. And every time he tries to ignore the emotional impact of his decisions, the consequences wait for him, patient and unwavering. One of the most painful truths Rick faces is that the consequences he fears most are not cosmic. They are personal, losing people, disappointing them, watching their trust dissolve, standing in the ruins of moments he should have protected. He has faced world-ending threats without flinching, but the quiet anger in Morty's eyes unsettles him. The disappointment in Beth's voice lingers. The frustration in Summer's posture latches onto him. These small human consequences are the ones he cannot escape, because they attach themselves not to reality, but to his own heart. Rick often tries to downplay the emotional weight of these consequences. He laughs them off, deflects, scoffs, and pretends none of it matters. But intelligence makes him hyper-aware. He knows exactly what he did wrong. He knows precisely why others are upset. He knows the moment he crossed the line, the second he went too far, the choice that unraveled a connection he valued more than he admitted. His awareness becomes another form of punishment. He cannot lie to himself about the reasons people pull away from him, not for long. He is too smart for denial to work completely. This emotional awareness becomes a burden because Rick cannot fix the consequences with invention. There is no machine that restores trust, no portal that returns people to a version of themselves before he hurt them, no tool that repairs emotional bonds as easily as he repairs a spaceship. For someone who can solve almost any physical problem instantly, the inability to solve emotional ones frustrates him deeply. It reveals the limits of his intelligence. It shows him the boundaries of his control. And Rick hates boundaries more than anything. Time travel does not help him. Alternate realities do not help him. Substituting versions of people he has lost does not help him. Every attempt to escape emotional consequences through scientific means only makes the consequences sharper, because each shortcut reminds him of what he is avoiding. And avoidance does not erase guilt. It only deepens it. It turns the original wound into a scar that never heals. Consequences also manifest in the way his family sees him. He knows they love him, but he also knows they fear him at times, or resent him, or expect him to disappoint them again. This perception weighs on him. He can see the moment someone loses a little faith in him. He can predict the shift in their behavior before they realize it themselves. His intelligence lets him map out the emotional trajectories of the people in his life, and sometimes it feels like watching a slow-motion car crash he caused, but cannot stop. With Morty, the consequences are the clearest. Morty looks at Rick with a mixture of admiration and exhaustion. Each dangerous adventure, each reckless decision, each emotional outburst leaves a mark. Rick sees those marks. He hears them in Morty's voice. He feels them in Morty's hesitation. And the knowledge of that harm creates a guilt Rick cannot escape. Morty does not have to say anything. Rick understands the consequences long before the words form. In quiet moments, when he lets himself feel without drowning it in distractions, Rick recognizes the cost of his choices with painful clarity. He sees how his brilliance isolates him. He sees how his detachment hurts the people who care about him. He sees how his attempts to protect himself from vulnerability create consequences that cut deeper than the vulnerability ever could. Intelligence, once again, becomes a paradox. It shows him the truth, but it does not give him the tools to handle it. Another consequence of Rick's intelligence is loneliness. Not physical loneliness, but emotional loneliness. The loneliness that comes from knowing he caused many of his own losses. The loneliness that comes from understanding why certain relationships cannot be repaired. The loneliness that comes from being aware of every moment he acted out of fear instead of courage. Rick can fill his world with adventure, noise, invention, and distraction, but the loneliness remains in the quiet spaces, the spaces where consequence and awareness meet. But consequences are not always punishment. Sometimes they become the beginning of change. Rick does not transform through cosmic battles or scientific breakthroughs. He transforms through consequences, through moments when Morty calls him out, when Summer refuses to follow him, when Beth challenges him, when someone he cares about shows him a reflection of himself he cannot ignore. These moments hurt, but they break through the walls his intelligence builds. They show him that consequence is not the enemy, it is the teacher. Slowly, painfully, Rick begins to respond to consequences differently. Instead of running immediately, he hesitates. Instead of deflecting, he listens. Instead of lashing out, he absorbs the discomfort. These small shifts reveal something intelligence could never predict: growth, not dramatic growth, not clean or consistent growth, but growth nonetheless. The kind that emerges when a person begins to accept that they are responsible for the world they create around them. Rick learns, over time, that consequences are not signs that he is broken. They are signs that he is connected, that he matters, that his actions have weight, that he is not floating through existence untouched by the impact of his choices. Consequences root him in the world in ways intelligence could not. They tether him to reality, and reality, despite its flaws, offers something he secretly craves: a chance to belong. In the end, Rick's intelligence cannot outrun consequence, because consequence is what makes him human. It is what shows him that he still cares. It is what pulls him back from the brink when he drifts too far into cynicism. It is what reminds him that connection is still possible, even after mistakes. And without consequence, there would be no reason for him to change, no reason for him to try, no reason for him to stay. Consequence hurts him, but in its own way, it also saves him. Vulnerability is something Rick Sanchez understands intellectually, but not emotionally. He can define it, observe it, predict it, even manipulate it. He can explain why beings across the multiverse crave intimacy, why they fear rejection, why they cling to connection despite the inevitability of loss. He can outline vulnerability as if it were a mathematical concept. But when it comes to allowing himself to feel it, everything inside him recoils. For someone with his level of intelligence, vulnerability feels like weakness. Not because vulnerability is weakness, but because intelligence convinces him that weakness is dangerous. Rick's mind is constantly constructing scenarios, analyzing risk, calculating outcomes. Every time he opens his heart, he sees every way it could break. Every time he grows close to someone, he sees every version of himself who lost someone he cared about. Every time he feels warmth, he anticipates the moment it will be taken from him. Vulnerability becomes a threat because it exposes him to possibilities he cannot control. Control is everything to Rick. Control keeps him moving. Control keeps him safe. Control protects him from the parts of himself he does not want to see. Vulnerability threatens that control. When he lets his guard down, the noise in his mind grows too loud. Thoughts he spent years suppressing rise to the surface. Memories he avoids become vivid. Longing he refuses to acknowledge becomes undeniable. And because Rick knows how deeply he can feel, the idea of being vulnerable terrifies him more than any cosmic threat. Intelligence amplifies this fear. It shows him the statistical reality of loss. It reminds him how often relationships fail. It reveals the emotional patterns he repeats. It tells him, with cruel accuracy, that vulnerability is an investment with unpredictable returns. He knows the universe does not promise safety. He knows people leave. He knows pain is not hypothetical, but inevitable. And because he understands these truths too clearly, he believes vulnerability is something he cannot afford. Yet despite all this, vulnerability is already inside him. It shows itself in the way he lingers when someone he loves walks away, in the way he hesitates before saying something sincere, in the rare moments when he lets sadness slip through the cracks of his sarcasm, in the way he returns to the family he pretends to be indifferent to, in the small, quiet acts of protection he performs without acknowledging them. Vulnerability lives in him, even when he tries to bury it. Rick hides vulnerability because he believes it makes him predictable. And predictability, in his mind, is dangerous. He fears that if people see the parts of him that hurt, they will use them against him, or worse, they will walk away. Intelligence tells him that closeness is risk. Experience tells him that risk leads to loss. Trauma tells him that loss is unbearable. This internal logic forms the armor he wears, thick, sharp, impossible to penetrate. But armor is heavy. Armor isolates. Armor suffocates. Rick carries it anyway. One of the most painful truths about Rick's vulnerability is that he wishes he did not need connection, but he does. His mind argues against it, but his heart reaches for it. He wants someone to understand him, even though he believes no one can. He wants to feel held, even though he convinces himself he is unlovable. He wants to speak honestly, even though he rarely lets the words escape. This conflict between desire and fear becomes a constant ache, one he numbs with humor or distraction. When someone gets close to him, Rick panics. Not visibly, not dramatically, but internally. He becomes unpredictable, abrupt, dismissive, sarcastic. These reactions are not signs of indifference, but signs of overwhelm. Connection triggers parts of him he spent decades avoiding. When someone sees him clearly, he feels exposed, and exposure, for someone with his history, feels like the first step toward abandonment. Vulnerability does not bring him comfort, it brings him dread. But the people who truly matter to him force vulnerability into the open, not through confrontation, but through presence. Morty's disappointment hurts him because somewhere inside he cares about Morty's opinion. Summer's challenges affect him because he respects her more than he admits. Beth's confusion breaks him because he longs to be the father she needed. These emotional reactions reveal the truth. Rick is vulnerable whether he chooses to be or not. His intelligence tries to analyze these feelings, but analysis cannot quiet them. He knows why he cares. He knows why he fears connection. He knows why he avoids vulnerability, but knowledge does not rewrite instinct. Rick tries to reason with his own emotions, but they do not answer to logic. They answer to the longing he refuses to name. There are moments when vulnerability surfaces, despite all his defenses. Moments when he looks tired enough to stop pretending. When he speaks honestly, without meaning to. When his sarcasm collapses, and something raw escapes. These moments are brief, but they are the closest thing he has to truth. His family sees them, even if he tries to hide them. And seeing him vulnerable does not make them leave. It brings them closer. This confuses Rick. Confusion leads to fear. Fear leads to retreat. Yet something changes over time. Not quickly, not cleanly, but gradually. As consequences shape him, as relationships shift, as he grows tired of running, Rick begins to experiment with vulnerability in small, quiet ways. He starts to stay in conversations he once escaped. He apologizes without sarcasm, even if awkwardly. He listens instead of deflecting. He lets people help him, not often, but more than he used to. These moments reveal that vulnerability does not destroy him. It grounds him. This slow shift reveals a truth intelligence never prepared him for. Vulnerability is not a flaw. It is not a risk designed to hurt him. It is the only way to build meaning in a universe that offers none by default. Rick begins to see that vulnerability does not make him weak. It makes him human. It allows him to feel something beyond fear and cynicism. It allows him to connect in ways his intelligence cannot replicate. And though he still struggles with it, he no longer sees vulnerability as something to erase. He begins to see it as something to understand. The cost of his intelligence is that it taught him to hide vulnerability. The beauty of his journey is that he begins to uncover it anyway. Longing is something Rick Sanchez carries quietly, like a shadow that follows him through every universe he steps into. It is not dramatic or loud. It does not announce itself. It sits beneath his sarcasm, beneath his anger, beneath his brilliance. It rests behind his eyes, in the moments between words. For someone who prides himself on logic, longing is the one emotion he cannot eliminate or rationalize. Intelligence can dismantle illusions, but it cannot erase yearning. Longing is what remains when everything else has collapsed. And Rick lives with that ache every day. He longs for connection, even as he pushes it away. He longs for belonging, even though he insists he does not need anyone. He longs for meaning, even while preaching that the universe has none. This tension between what he believes and what he feels creates a constant, quiet ache that intelligence only magnifies. The more he understands, the more he yearns. The more he sees the universe clearly, the more he feels the emptiness inside himself. This longing did not begin with loss, it began with awareness. Even as a younger version of himself, before tragedy shaped him, Rick sensed the distance between his mind and the world around him. He could not fully connect, not because he did not want to, but because he saw things others did not. He understood too much, too quickly. He felt out of pace with the people he loved. This early disconnect planted the first seed of longing, a longing to be understood, to be matched, to be seen without explanation. As he grew older, this longing deepened. Genius isolated him, trauma cracked him, loss carved out hollow spaces inside him, and intelligence, instead of helping him heal, intensified every fracture by making him aware of the parts of himself he could not repair. He sees the shape of the love he wants, but he cannot reach it. He sees the path toward peace, but he cannot take it. He sees the possibility of closeness, but fear blocks him. Longing becomes the emotional residue of all the paths he never walked. Most of all, Rick longs for something simple, a moment of stillness where he feels safe, a place that does not shift beneath him, a connection that does not depend on performance or genius. He wants to be held without having to earn it. He wants to be loved without conditions. He wants to belong without needing to pretend. But these desires contradict his worldview. Intelligence tells him that simplicity is naive. Experience tells him that vulnerability is dangerous. So he buries the longing beneath layers of humor and avoidance. Yet, longing escapes anyway. It reveals itself in the way he returns to the family he pretends to have outgrown, in the way he lingers in doorways instead of leaving immediately, in the way he lets Morty express frustration without retaliation, in the way he looks at Beth with regret hidden behind nonchalance. These small actions expose a truth intelligence cannot override. He cares deeply, and caring creates longing. The cost of intelligence becomes painfully clear when Rick tries to silence this longing with logic. He tells himself relationships are temporary. He tells himself love is a biological strategy. He tells himself attachment is irrational. But even when he convinces his mind, his heart refuses to listen. The longing remains, steady and quiet. This conflict creates a kind of emotional turbulence he rarely shows. He is torn between knowing the universe is indifferent and feeling everything intensely anyway. Longing also reveals itself through repetition. Rick keeps returning to the same types of relationships, the same behaviors, the same cycles, because something inside him hopes for a different outcome. Hope is the quiet engine behind longing, and despite everything he claims, Rick has not lost hope completely. If he had, he would not return home. He would not risk attachment. He would not protect anyone. He would not care enough to be afraid. He longs for redemption, even though he pretends redemption is a foolish concept. He longs for someone to see the fractured parts of him and not turn away. He longs for acceptance from the people he believes he has disappointed. He longs for a version of himself that feels whole. But each of these longings conflicts with his belief that nothing lasts. So he learns to want quietly, invisibly. Some of the deepest longing Rick carries is directed inward. He longs for the version of himself he might have been if life had hurt him less. The version who stayed. The version who loved openly. The version who did not run. When he sees other Ricks who made gentler choices, the longing sharpens. Not envy, but grief for the self he lost along the way. Intelligence makes him painfully aware of these alternate selves, and this awareness becomes a source of heartbreak he rarely acknowledges. At times, longing makes him reckless. He keeps searching for something he cannot define, a feeling, a connection, a moment of clarity. He leaps into danger not because he is fearless, but because he is chasing something only he can sense. Sometimes he finds glimpses of it, a shared laugh, a rare moment of honesty, an unexpected silence that feels safe. But glimpses are not enough. They spark longing more than they satisfy it. Yet longing is not his enemy. It is proof that he has not given up. It is proof that humanity still exists inside him despite the armor he wears. It is proof that intelligence has not stripped away his ability to feel. Longing keeps him tethered to the world, even when he pretends he wants to leave it. Over time, Rick begins to see that longing does not need to be erased. It needs to be understood. It is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of desire, a sign of hope, a sign of life. And though he may never fully admit it, longing is what drives him to return to the people who care about him. It is what keeps him from disappearing into another dimension forever. It is what pulls him back from the brink again and again. Intelligence taught him to fear vulnerability. Experience taught him to expect pain. But longing teaches him something neither of those could, that he still believes, deep down, in the possibility of something better. Even if he cannot say it, even if he cannot pursue it openly, even if he pretends otherwise. Longing is the quiet force that intelligence can never silence. And as long as he continues to feel it, Rick remains connected to the fragile, beautiful parts of existence he claims to have outgrown. Connection, for Rick Sanchez, is both the thing he needs most and the thing he fears most. It is the quiet center of his emotional universe, the place where longing, vulnerability, guilt, and desire all intersect. Intelligence complicates this, not by eliminating his need for connection, but by convincing him he is unworthy of it. The more he understands himself and the universe, the more he believes he cannot be genuinely loved. This belief shapes every interaction he has, every relationship he touches, every moment he gets close to someone, only to retreat at the first sign of sincerity. Rick does not struggle to form connections because he feels nothing. He struggles because he feels too much. His intelligence does not dull emotion, it amplifies it. He sees every bond in all its complexity. He recognizes every risk. He anticipates every moment of potential loss. Connection becomes something he wants desperately, but approaches with caution, analyzing every detail until intimacy feels like a mathematical problem instead of an emotional truth. He has loved deeply in his life, far more deeply than he admits. He has lost deeply too. Those losses shape the way he connects now. They taught him that closeness is a liability, that caring invites pain, that relying on others leaves you exposed. His mind holds these lessons like warnings. Every time someone reaches toward him, his thoughts fill with predictions, calculations, scenarios where connection ends in heartbreak. He sees not only the present moment, but the infinite ways it could shatter. Because he sees so much, he hesitates. Rick fears hurting the people he cares about. He fears disappointing them. He fears repeating old mistakes. But beneath those fears lies a deeper one. He fears being seen, truly seen. Not as a genius, not as a cynic, not as a chaotic force of nature, but as the complicated, wounded person he is. Connection requires honesty. Honesty requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires letting someone get close enough to see the parts of him he hides behind jokes and inventions and cold logic. He does not believe anyone should have to carry that weight. This belief shapes his relationship with his family. Morty, who looks up to him with hope and frustration. Summer, who challenges him with boldness and doubt. Beth, who mirrors both his brilliance and his brokenness. Even Jerry, who reflects the version of humanity Rick claims to disdain, but secretly envies for its emotional simplicity. Rick feels connected to them all in ways his intellect cannot measure, but he does not believe he deserves their love or their trust. Every kind gesture confuses him. Every moment of care unsettles him. He wants it, cherishes it secretly, but rejects it out of fear of corrupting it. In his mind, connection becomes dangerous because he cannot separate his intelligence from his emotional impact. He knows how easily he can hurt people with words sharper than he intends. He knows how quickly he can make a mistake that sends someone spiraling. He knows how often he chooses logic over empathy, even when empathy is what the moment requires. He sees all the ways he could fail someone, and instead of risking failure, he pulls away. But connection finds him anyway. It finds him in Morty's loyalty, in Summer's insight, in Beth's longing, in moments where he accidentally reveals more than he meant to, in the rare instances when he chooses to stay instead of running. These connections form around him like constellations, drawing lines between moments he did not know mattered. And though he tries to keep his distance, these relationships change him. They soften him. They frustrate him. They pull him into a world where logic does not dictate everything. A world where feelings matter even when they are inconvenient. The cost of intelligence becomes painfully visible when Rick tries to maintain connection. He cannot turn off the part of his mind that calculates risk. He cannot silence the voice that tells him he is too dangerous to love. He cannot ignore the instinct to withdraw when someone gets close. Intelligence turns connection into a battlefield, a place where his fear of hurting others clashes with his fear of being alone. Yet, despite all this conflict, Rick still reaches for connection in subtle ways. He offers protection instead of comfort, because protection feels safer. He offers blunt honesty instead of gentle reassurance, because honesty feels like the only thing he can trust. He offers presence instead of words, because presence keeps him anchored without exposing him too deeply. His love does not appear the way others expect, but it is there, quietly woven into the choices he makes. Some of the strongest connections he forms are unspoken. He does not tell Morty he cares, but he shows it in every moment he chooses to bring him home alive. He does not tell Summer he respects her, but he listens to her ideas even when he pretends not to. He does not tell Beth he loves her, but he looks at her with a sorrow that reveals the weight of his regret. Connection lives between the things he says and the things he cannot bring himself to say. There are moments when Rick lets the facade slip, when he is tired enough, worn down enough, lonely enough to admit something real, a sentence, a glance, a sigh. These moments are small, but they are the closest he comes to emotional truth, and the people around him feel them even if they cannot decipher them completely. This is how connection survives in Rick's world, quietly, awkwardly, imperfectly, but persistently. Over time, Rick begins to understand something intelligence never prepared him for. Connection is not earned through perfection. It is built through presence, through mistakes, through the willingness to stay even when staying hurts. He sees that people do not love him because he is brilliant. They love him because beneath all the chaos, he is still trying. He is still learning. He is still human. He still cares. And caring, for Rick, is the bravest act of all. The connections he believes he does not deserve are the ones that pull him back from the edge. They remind him that he is not alone, even when he chooses to be. They show him that intelligence cannot replace intimacy. They teach him that love, in all its messy, unpredictable forms, is worth the risk he fears so deeply. Slowly, he begins to let these connections shape him, not perfectly, not permanently, but honestly. And that honesty becomes the foundation for something he never expected to find, a reason to stay. Meaning is the one thing Rick Sanchez has spent his entire life running from and searching for at the same time. He mocks it, denies it, dismantles it, dissects it, dismisses it. He calls it an illusion. He calls it a coping mechanism. He calls it a story people tell themselves to avoid facing the truth of the universe. And yet, beneath all the layers of cynicism, beneath all the intellectual armor, beneath all the escape routes and distractions, Rick longs for meaning more deeply than he will ever admit aloud. This final part of his emotional landscape is not dramatic. It is not explosive. It does not arrive in a revelation or collapse beneath the weight of tragedy. Meaning, for Rick, appears quietly, slowly, in the spaces he never expected it to grow, in the relationships he tried to sabotage, in the moments he tried to forget, in the stillness he used to fear. Meaning becomes the unexpected result of a life he never believed would give him anything real. He begins to sense meaning in the strangest places, not in the grand cosmic truths he once pursued, not in the alternate dimensions he explored, not in the inventions that changed reality. Meaning arrives in smaller forms. In Morty's tired smile after a long adventure, in Summer's questions that challenge him more than any theorem, in Beth's determination to choose her own identity even when that identity confuses him, in the way the family moves around him at the breakfast table, flawed and chaotic but undeniably present. Meaning grows in the moments he stays instead of leaving. For most of his life, Rick believed meaning required certainty. It required perfection. It required the universe itself validating his existence. But over time, he realizes something far more human. Meaning can be found in imperfect moments, in unresolved conversations, in fractured relationships that still matter, in the quiet choice to be here instead of somewhere else. Intelligence taught him to expect nothing from the universe. Experience taught him to fear anything that felt real. But meaning teaches him a different truth. You do not need the universe to care in order to matter to the people you love. This realization does not arrive as a complete thought. It arrives as a feeling, a series of small recognitions that accumulate until they become undeniable. Rick notices that he returns home more often. He notices that he hesitates before making a decision that could hurt someone. He notices that he apologizes, clumsily, unpredictably, but sincerely. He notices that he chooses connection over detachment more frequently, even if those choices scare him. Meaning begins to attach itself to his actions, one small moment at a time, until his life becomes something different than the purely chaotic existence he once embraced. He still feels the pull of nihilism. He still believes the universe is indifferent. He still recognizes the emptiness at the center of existence. But meaning does not need to contradict nihilism. It grows beside it. Meaning becomes the human answer to cosmic silence. If the universe does not provide purpose, then purpose becomes something created, not discovered, something nurtured, not inherited, something fragile, not eternal. Rick begins to feel a strange comfort in this fragility. Meaning becomes precious because it is temporary. Connection becomes valuable because it can break. Love becomes powerful because it is not guaranteed. These truths do not frighten him the way they used to. Instead, they pull him toward the people he once thought he had outgrown. He begins to understand that the temporary nature of connection is not a flaw. It is the very reason connection has weight. Meaning also emerges through consequence. The consequences he once believed he could escape now anchor him. The pain he caused becomes something he learns from. The harm he inflicted becomes part of the path that leads him towards sincerity. He still struggles, still retreats, still slips into old patterns, but every time he returns, meaning grows a little stronger. Rick sees meaning in Morty's stubborn loyalty. Morty stays, even when he doubts, even when he breaks, even when he questions Rick's choices. Morty stays not out of blind devotion, but because he sees the parts of Rick cannot see himself. That connection teaches Rick something intelligence never could. Meaning does not require perfection. It requires effort. He sees meaning in Summer's resilience. She pushes back when he goes too far. She demands honesty. She demands effort. She demands presence. Summer's strength reminds Rick that connection can exist without fear. It can be built through friction and disagreement and growth. Her presence challenges him to be better not through obedience, but through accountability. He sees meaning in Beth, in the complicated, painful, beautiful bond they share. She mirrors pieces of him he tries to hide. She exposes his contradictions without cruelty. She chooses connection with him, even when he does not believe he deserves it. Meaning grows in the way she reaches toward him, not as a genius, not as a legend, but as her father. He even sees meaning, reluctantly, in Jerry. Jerry, who embodies a kind of emotional transparency Rick cannot fathom. Jerry complicates things for him, because Jerry is everything Rick fears, being sincere, vulnerable, dependent, open. But Jerry is also a reminder that meaning does not require brilliance. It requires presence. Meaning does not transform Rick overnight. He still makes mistakes. He still lashes out. He still retreats behind sarcasm and logic and self-destruction. But each time he chooses to return, each time he chooses to stay, each time he chooses to try, meaning grows, quietly, patiently, without demanding perfection. This slow shift reveals something intelligence could never predict about him. Rick is capable of change. Not dramatic change, not cinematic transformation, but human change. Soft change. Change made of tiny decisions that accumulate until his life becomes something new. Meaning also appears in the quiet moments he spends alone, when the noise of invention and chaos fades and he is left with nothing but his thoughts. In those moments, Rick feels the gentle hum of something he could never explain with science. The sense that his life, with all its contradictions and failures, still holds weight. he begins to recognize that meaning does not need to be universal. It only needs to be personal. Meaning is not discovered in the structure of the cosmos. It is discovered in the way he looks at the people he loves and realizes he wants them to be okay. He wants them to live. He wants them to find happiness he cannot always provide. Meaning grows in the desire for someone else to feel safe. Rick learns, slowly, that meaning is not something you prove. It is something you practice. Through presence, through choice, through showing up even when you are afraid, through choosing connection even when you believe you do not deserve it. Meaning is created in the moments when he stops running. In the end, Rick's search for meaning becomes less about the universe and more about himself. He realizes that intelligence will never answer the questions that matter most. Intelligence can reveal the mechanics of existence, but it cannot reveal the purpose of living. That purpose emerges from connection, from vulnerability, from longing, from consequence, from the quiet courage to remain open in a world that offers no guarantees. Meaning does not save him, but it steadies him. It gives him a place to return to when the weight of his own mind becomes too heavy. It gives him a reason to open the door instead of disappearing into another universe. It gives him a reason to try again, even after he fails. Meaning becomes the one truth he cannot deny, because he can feel it even when he cannot explain it. And in a universe where nothing is certain, feeling is enough.